Yeah, but then we have, no matter how you do that, let's look at the cycle bridge on the way between Wellington and Melling, the way between Wellington and the Lower Hutt. Just this week, Chris Bishop accused of approving that project because it was in his electorate, even though it didn't meet the cost-benefit analysis. Already great debate over a second Mount Vic tunnel again. You can talk a good game on infrastructure, Katherine, but often it doesn't survive the reality of political contests.
No, and look, I think this is why we've put this report together, really. And, we did a survey of our members and political flip-flopping was the number one concern they have. Because for business to invest, particularly in things like infrastructure, which are intergenerational investments, they need the confidence that they're going to have the political backing to do it. So what we're hoping is that our big businesses start to speak out on it. Business New Zealand has 70 industry groups associated with us, and they're all very keen on this framework. So I think we've just got to keep calling the politicians out when they do something that just looks like petty politics, frankly.
At the expense of the country and the country's economy. Okay.
Scott Morrison's one of those people. The Treasurer was spelling out his interest in this week's budget.
To support growth, we choose to invest in building Australia, rail by rail, runway by runway, and road by road.
Yeah. That sounds welcome, doesn't it? We need to be investing in infrastructure because it increases productivity. Jane O'Sullivan from the University of Queensland isn't so sure.
It would if we didn't overcrowd them. So if we're just building more infrastructure rather than better infrastructure, and then we're filling it up with more people, we're not actually advancing. The problem is that people assume that all infrastructure is investment.
Yes.
And that's not true. An investment is something that if you didn't do it, you wouldn't be any worse off. A recurrent cost is something you have to do in order not to go backwards. So if we're adding 350,000 people to Australia every year, clearly if we don't provide any more infrastructure, we're going to be worse off over time.
Right, so
all of the infrastructure that we have to put in place just so that hospital waiting lists don't get longer than they already are, and that trains don't get more crowded, and that sewage treatment plants don't get overwhelmed, that's recurrent cost. That's running in order to stand still. So all of that is bad debt if we're actually borrowing to pay for it, which the state governments to a large extent have been.
This takes a bit of thinking about. Jane O'Sullivan's framing this in a way that you may not have heard before. To follow it, you have to pay attention.
The key there is that a lot of the things that we spend money on are durable. And so we're spending a certain amount of money this year, but we're actually enjoying the services of all of the infrastructure and equipment and even the professional trained people that we've put in place over years. So if we think about infrastructure lasting for around 50 years, then each year, in order to maintain the turnover of that, we'd only be having to pay for about 2% of it. If our population's growing at 1% per annum, we suddenly have to buy 3% of it because we've got 2% for the turnover and 1% in order to expand it to hold 1% more people. So we've gone from 2% to 3% that we're paying for. That's a 50% increase in how much we need to spend on infrastructure. So if we're growing at 1.5% per annum, which Australia has been doing lately, that's like a 75% increase in the bill for infrastructure. And that bill isn't insubstantial. Just the turnover is about 13% of GDP. So adding 1% population growth is an extra 6.5% to 7% of GDP that we've got to divert from other spending in order to pay for that extra infrastructure.
What Jane's saying is the growth in the population ends up overwhelming the utility we get from the infrastructure that we're building because of the growth of the population. So we never catch up, and it always costs more.
Okay, what apart from infrastructure, and I'll throw one at you if you're concerned about this, mining and mineral businesses, we've got Shane Jones desperately trying to get more people mining and prospecting in this country. We've got the other side of the political spectrum saying we would just turn that around as soon as we got in.
Yeah, absolutely. The world needs minerals for all of the smart tech that we're doing. New Zealand desperately needs high-paying jobs, and we either use the resources we've got, and we have to remember we've got a massive country. We've got a country the size of the United Kingdom with a population the size of Sydney, so there's no shortage of land in New Zealand if we've got some of these riches and resources, and that can help us become again a first world country, and then you've got some way of paying for your retirement and your health and your aging population. But